What's happening, triathletes? Welcome to Desi Tri Coaching. I'm Coach Ray, and in today's video I'll talk about how I learned to swim, because this is what my swim used to look like, and this is what my swim looks like right now. But it's getting a little chilly over here, so first let me get back to my apartment and then I'll tell you how I learned to swim. Alright, so now that I'm back in my apartment, let's talk about how I learned to swim. So for reference, these are my swim times over here. I swam like a 1:14 at Ironman Louisville in 2016. And then I swam like a couple of low 38s in a 70.3. So it took me about 6 weeks to learn how to swim. And I went from swimming 50 yards to 2,500 yards overnight. It just clicked on the 6th week. Now the first 6 weeks I did struggle to swim. I couldn't swim more than 50 yards. But the important thing was that I was consistent for the 6 weeks no matter what. Now talking about how I learned to swim, there are actually 4 things I worked on, and I'll share them with you and hopefully you guys can take away something from it. So the first thing was the catch-up drill, and I'll talk about this in a minute. The second was frequency. The third was using swim toys or swim aids. And the fourth one was just visualization and using cues to become a better swimmer. So let's talk about the catch-up drill. So the catch-up drill is basically where you have your hand come and touch each other every stroke. And if you're not familiar with it, go look up a video on YouTube. They have a lot of instructions on it. But that's sort of the first step in learning how to swim. And I did this drill more often than not. I did it every session. I did it about 5 to 6 times a week. And a sample set would be 40 by 50, where I would do a 25 drill and a 25 swim. And the reason I would use 50s is because I could only swim 50 yards and then I was swimming in a 25-yard pool. So I could do a 25 drill and a 25 swim. And I did this almost every day of the week. Every time I went onto the pool, pretty much half of my session was just doing the drill. And I did the catch-up drill in an infinite number of ways. So I did the catch-up drill with a buoy, catch-up drill with a paddle, catch-up drill with fins, catch-up drill with a kickboard. So if there was any variation on the catch-up drill, I pretty much did it those 5 to 6 times a week. Which brings me to my next point, frequency. So swimming is a lot like playing an instrument. You got to be consistent with it. You can't go down once a week and expect to learn how to swim. It's a pretty unnatural movement. So I made it a point to go down to the pool at least 5 times a week. Sometimes if I had time on weekends, I would go swim twice a day. And for those 6 weeks, swimming took priority. If it meant missing a bike or a run, so be it. But for those 6 weeks, I was in the pool almost every day of the week. The next thing is what I like to call swim aids. Some people call them swim toys. So I'm sure you guys are familiar with this. If not, it's called a pool buoy. I use this. This actually helps isolate your stroke because it eliminates the leg, because it's going to keep your legs afloat, and that way you can focus on your stroke, you can focus on your breathing. The next thing I used was paddles. These are great for actually enforcing good technique, because if you don't swim properly, the paddle actually falls off. So it sort of forces you to have good technique. Also, these paddles are great for developing strength in your stroke. The next swim aid I used were fins. These are great for developing your kick and learning how to kick. So don't be afraid to use swim toys or swim aids. They are great for isolating different sections of your stroke or different elements of your stroke. And you can focus on one item at a time. And the next thing was just visualization and using cues. So for instance, I knew after looking at a few videos that my hand crosses over the midline and I over rotate. So to fix this, I would use something what I call thumb to thigh. And I would ensure that when I finish my stroke, my thumb touches my thigh. Now that actually ensures 2 things. First, it ensures that you don't shorten your stroke, that you finish your stroke completely. 2, your hand actually goes in a straight line because you want to touch your thumb to your thigh. That would ensure that you don't roll over or your hand does not cross your belly. So I would always make it a point and have this pointer in my head that my hand needs to touch my thigh. The second pointer which I worked on was what I would like to call a toe touch. So every time I would kick or do a kick set or use fins, I would ensure that my feet actually touch each other, and I would visualize swimming through a narrow tube. So my kick would try to be as narrow as possible. And the way I could keep it narrow was I would try and touch my toes constantly. If my toes did not touch or I did not feel my toes touching, I would assume I'm scissor kicking. And that's something which you see with a lot of triathletes and new swimmers, that they actually end up scissor kicking and the legs go wide when they kick. The next cue which I worked on was what I like to call breaking the ice. So I would visualize the water as a sheet of ice, and the intention is I want to use my elbow to pop that ice or break the ice, if you will. Now what that does is it actually forces you to have a high elbow if you can really exaggerate this motion. And once you have a high elbow, you're actually going to have your elbow higher than your wrist, higher than your fingertips. And that's what a good swim stroke looks like. Now this is not mandatory for an open water swim, but if you're learning to swim or you want to work on your nice high elbow, you can actually visualize breaking the ice with your elbow. So after you finish your stroke, you break the ice and then get your hand out and initiate the catch. So it was these couple of pointers which kept me aware as to what I'm trying to accomplish in the swim. I would visualize my swim, if you will. Now to sum it up, in those 6 weeks, I pretty much did the catch-up drill every day. I was obviously very frequent with the swim. I went under the pool 5 to 6 times a week. I use swim toys or swim aids. Don't be afraid to use them. And last but not the least, I would actually visualize stuff in my head before the swim. And I would keep these cues and pointers such as breaking the ice or having my feet touch each other. So that sort of ensured that I'm actually swimming with a good stroke. And another tip I have for you guys is try and keep your intervals short. So use sets of 50s or 25s. Don't jump onto hundreds directly, because when you try and swim hundreds, you compromise your form if you've not learned how to swim. But if you keep your intervals really short, like 25 drill, 25 swim, you're actually swimming with good form and you can hold good form for those 25 meters. That way you're ingraining good technique in yourself. Alright guys, I hope you guys found this video informative. If you did, give it a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section below, how did you guys learn to swim? And I'll see you guys next time.